Heavenly Father, Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that you've blessed us with another day. You gave us a right mind and a right spirit. And we thank you, Lord, beforehand, before we hear a single word from her, for dear Jenny Beall, who has volunteered her time to speak to us and enlighten us about this disease, this condition, that through so many of us familiar with because we have family members and we have seen it. So we pray, Lord, that you give her the strength and the words that as she give us this word, and also open our understanding so that we can hear and apply the things that we hear. I ask, Lord, that you bless every individual. Personally, I want to thank you for renewed health. And even though I was able to follow the services online, I just praise you, Lord. So we ask that you bless every individual online now and those who will join us as we go. We ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen, amen, and amen. As I mentioned earlier, this evening we are in for a treat. This afternoon we are going to be addressing effective communication, and our presenter this evening is Jennifer Beall. And Jennifer has a wealth of information under her belt. I'm just going to give you a brief background. She's a professor of pharmacy practice and the director of pharmacy labs and simulation at the Samford University McWharton School of Pharmacy. She graduated from Samford in 1996 and has practiced in hospital and clinical settings. She has served with the Alzheimer's Association since 2016. And this evening, she's going to be giving us a little bit of information about how Alzheimer's and dementia can affect an individual's ability to communicate during the different stages. And she's also going to give us some tips on how we can better communicate with people who are living with the disease. And so I want to turn it over to Jennifer, and at the end of the session, we'll open it up for questions. So Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here with you all. And I do agree this is a great presentation. I'm saying that because I didn't put it together. Not that would, but I think they've put some really good information together. And honestly, these are things that I wish that I had known when my dad was alive. I'll talk about him a little bit. Let me go ahead and share my screen and get those slides pulled up. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So like I say, as you can see on the screen, and as I was already presented, so we're going to talk about effective communication strategies. And again, my role with the Alzheimer's Association, I've served with them since 2016, as was already mentioned. I did that mainly because my father passed away in 2008, and he had dementia. And when he was alive, I remember saying at some point I wanted to volunteer with this association and just to kind of have a place to bring the experiences that we had with him and be able to do that productively. And so I'm really glad to be able to be here with you all. If you are either living with someone that has Alzheimer's or dementia or helping to care or just you've been touched by this, I wish that we didn't have that in common. This is something that I would love for us to not have to talk about this anymore, but I do think this is going to be some really good information about communication, as already mentioned. So you can see the goals for today. I'm not going to read these. Oh, went back too far. The goals for today are going to be to talk about the way that communication does change throughout the course of the disease. We'll talk about some verbal behaviors, some kind of nonverbal communication, and then look at some strategies to really connect and communicate at each stage of the disease. So this is this word cloud here, I think really just speaks to how communication is just so much more than talking and listening. It's also about sending and receiving messages. It's done through attitude, through tone of voice, facial expressions, body language. And really communication is how we relate to each other. So communication is just such a basic way that we can connect with other people. And as the brain changes with Alzheimer's and dementia, people really do lose the ability to speak and decode language in the usual ways. And so the better that we can understand these changes, then the better we can connect with people that have Alzheimer's throughout the course of the disease. So as we can see here, Alzheimer's progresses throughout different phases. So people are going to lose their ability to communicate their thoughts and their words as this disease progresses. And then they'll lose the ability to understand the words that other people speak to them. However, throughout this process, they do maintain a sense of self. And I think that's really important throughout all the phases of the disease. They maintain a sense of self. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. And that means that the elements of those characteristics that made that person unique remains with them throughout the disease. And so connecting with that person's sense of self is going to be really key to effective communication. It's obviously it would be very individualized. It would be based on who that person has been. In the early stages of the disease, there may just be a few noticeable changes in the way that they communicate. It may be that the words change, or kind of asking how the person would like to communicate as the disease progresses can be really useful. Language abilities are going to diminish as the disease progresses, and communication really does move from sort of easy conversation to relying on emotions and relying on the five senses to connect. Remember that the essence of the person continues and it doesn't change throughout the course of the disease. So respect of that person as an adult, as the adult that he or she is, then can help to kind of maintain that respect that they've always had. And so adjusting the communication based on what's most meaningful to the person today, no matter what the stage, is vital. And so as you can see here, there's different ways that can communicate throughout the different stages. In the early stage, we can convey thoughts and feelings through language. It may be that they misinterpret what other people say. In the middle stage, the person might actually use more basic words and sentences and rely more on tone of voice or facial expression. And so we get into the later stage, then they may still respond to familiar words, phrases. I think songs is a really strong communication tool for people in late stage. And body language and the five senses tend to be how people connect. So we'll look at each of these stages individually. In the early stage, and changes that you might notice. You might notice they have difficulty finding the right words. It may take a little bit longer to speak or respond, kind of withdraw from conversations, and maybe struggle to make decisions or with problem solving. So like I said, in the early stages, you may or may not see many changes, or it might even be that the changes are easy to kind of chalk up to something else. And with my dad, for example, he always had really bad hearing loss. And so some of the changes that we notice in his communication, like, well, he just can't hear the conversation. And so we kind of just chalked it up to that. But whether you notice the changes in this early stage or not, the communication in this early stage really is crucial. It is a period when everyone involved is kind of adjusting to this diagnosis, assuming that the diagnosis has taken place at this point. And even if there's a suspicion of it, there's sort of thoughts or feelings around the changes that would come that are lying ahead. And so denial is honestly going to be a part of this disease for some people. And so while for other people, like the emotions can be really overwhelming. And so denial, I think, is a very, very understandable and very acceptable kind of response when that diagnosis takes place. Or again, even when that diagnosis is suspected. So coming to terms with the diagnosis and the emotions can be maybe made a little bit better by kind of talking about what the feelings are. Expressing that connection that you have with the other person. It really can kind of help with that acceptance phase a little bit, maybe. Communication in this process also can bring closer together as you're kind of everyone's sort of adjusting together in this as the disease progresses. Now we're going to hear from Martha Tierney. She's the Associate Director for Volunteer Research Programs at the Alzheimer's Association, the national office up in Chicago. And she's going to talk about how to be helpful in this early phase.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool. So you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
I think that's some really great advice, and a great point that I think caregivers a lot of times struggle with, like how to help the person in this early stage. And so it's, especially if you kind of already have that open communication with the person, like asking, okay, as this disease progresses, what would you like for me to do? Would you like for me to step in and kind of help you with words, or just give you time, or kind of asking the person how they would like to be, what they would like to have done as this disease progresses. I think that getting those preferences is a really respectful way of showing that you care about that person's feelings. So again, one of the best ways to connect as you're dealing with this early stage, offering help with communication is, again, asking directly how they would like to be helped. To keep sentences clear and straightforward. Shorter sentences can make your meaning clear, and long explanations might be kind of difficult for the person to. So the one thing too would be I got some internet connections unstable. So if y'all have any problems hearing me, let me know. It says that short sentences can be kind of a little bit easier for someone to understand. Avoiding long explanations and kind of cue for the person, and try not to talk down to them. I know it's really difficult. At times it becomes sort of like an authoritative position, or so you to kind of talk to the person a little bit more childlike. And so part of a sense of self is also maintaining their it's the grown up that they've always been. It may take the person a little bit longer to find words or put thoughts. So it's going to be important to leave plenty of time for conversations. Conversations a little bit longer than they used to. And so keep in mind that the conversational needs will change over time. And so it's important that they do get to have their voice be heard. So leaving those conversations, and be sure to include anybody in the conversation, especially if it affects them or if it's planning for their future. Making sure that they get to be a part of those discussions or those plans is really. So mind not to make assumptions, especially about a person's ability to communicate just because they have that diagnosis. The disease really does affect you differently. And so it's important just to kind of treat each individual where they are. Avoid making assumptions about what they can or can't do or can't say. Speak directly to the person, especially if you want to know how they're doing. I think to kind of ask how they're doing, and the third person to ask somebody else can be a little bit frustrating. Explore which method of communication is most comfortable for the person. It could be that the phone is more comfortable, or email, or just talking face to face. And so find out what they would prefer. I think this next bullet point is important, that it's okay to laugh. And so with my dad, especially, he always had this great sense of humor. And so laughter was just such a big part of our lives and just communication with him. And so there's no reason for that to stop because this diagnosis has happened. So I think it's okay to remember that it's okay to laugh, and sometimes humor can lighten the mood in stressful moments and maybe make communication a little bit easier. I think also be honest and frank about your emotions, about your feelings. It's important not to pull away from someone that's got this diagnosis. I think they're going to feel rather lonely or scared as it is. And so the more they can stay connected with people that are in their life, I think is going to be really important. So now as we're looking at the middle stage, moving on to the moderate stage, you can see some of the things here on the screen that are some of the changes that are noticed. Some other things include like difficulty organizing words logically, reverting, or maybe if someone is not a native English speaker, it might be that they revert back to their native language. Using curse words. My dad's sister actually did this. So she had dementia a few years ahead of him, and she never cursed in her life. And she started cursing when she had dementia. And so there's going to be some changes in communication along those lines as well. It might be that someone relies more on gestures than on speaking. And it could be the person has difficulty following a conversation or following a TV program or a movie. One thing I will say too is if you ever notice that these changes that you see that look like dementia or Alzheimer's, if you notice a sudden, a major or sudden change, kind of it happens really frequently or happens really quickly, definitely that would be a good time to consult a physician, because it could be that it's not from Alzheimer's or dementia. It could be that there's a physical issue, it could be a medication related issue. And so I think if something happens suddenly, it's really important to consult a doctor in that moment. So in our next video, we're going to hear from Beverly, who's caring for her husband who has Alzheimer's.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
I think that's a great reminder. Taking your time when you're responding to someone with dementia is important. You really can't expect that person to behave as they behaved in the past. And so the reasonable response may not be the one that you get. And if communication isn't getting the desired response, then focus on what you can change, maybe to alter that situation. So again, connecting in the middle stage. One thing is to kind of approach the person gently. I've heard people say to approach from the front. That way, if they kind of don't have that peripheral vision, it can be very startling if they don't see you coming in. So approaching them from the front. Say who you are. So even if it's like with my dad, even if it's like, well, they should know who I am. I was like, hi, Dad, I'm your daughter, Jenny. And so just to, if they can't remember your name in that moment, I think that's important. And even call that person by name if it's someone that you wouldn't have a title for. Sometimes using touch really can show that you care. Sometimes words may not be understood quite as well, but I think a gentle touch can help to get someone's attention. Try not to criticize, correct, or impose your perspective or argue with them. One thing that you'll hear often from the Alzheimer's Association, some of their messaging is to join the person where they are. I think this kind of correcting and arguing we did with my dad, and it kind of felt like a parent correcting a child so that they would kind of know that information for the future, which is really what we do with kids. We're trying to correct so that we can improve future behavior. But that correction isn't going to be remembered or understood. And so trying to avoid correcting, if, like, for example, if my dad, at one point he said, I think it was 1956. And so instead of like, no, like, trying to correct him, just, okay, it's 1956, and try to join him in that moment. Trying as much as possible to pay attention to your tone and be calm, which I know is much easier said than done, especially in really frustrating moments or frustrating seasons. And so calm and patient is important. That person really can sense kind of feel the tension and sense what's going on. And then trying to take your time. Like I say, it's going to take longer to communicate. It might be the person's trying to find words or just kind of struggle with how to communicate. Giving plenty of time for those conversations is really important. Now we're going to hear from Rebecca, who's Alzheimer's disease.
She could sense my frustration, because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, she was very old school, and she's like, don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question. So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
I think that's with my dad's sister. She would repeat over and over, and that could be really frustrating. answer the same question repeatedly. I think that's where some of that the communication. So instead of trying to convince the person to, you just ask me that, except that the person doesn't know it, and just try to repeat the answer again. I've heard even say repeat the answer in the same way. It could be if you kind of change up the response from one response to the next, the person might be trying to process each of those, and so repeating the answer in the same way can be really useful. So again, in the I've mentioned this already, but trying to join the person in their reality. Keep the respect and empathy in your mind, and then assess what they need. Is it maybe that there's a behavior or something that they're doing that's they can't really, they're hungry, or they can't communicate that, you know, there's something that they need. So it could be that try to assess if there's a physical need that person needs. Let the person know that. And so, you know, there might be some kind of emotional outburst, and it could be that you know, them trying to communicate, I don't like what's going on here, or, you know, I'm really frustrated with these changes. And so, you know, trying to let the person know that you hear their maybe even ask if you're sad. Are you sad? How are you feeling right now? And try to get them to feelings as they can. And then to like just address whatever going on. Again, provide a brief answer, and then it could be that if we repeat the answer time, then it kind of is difficult for them to understand. And then try to respond to the emotions behind the statement. And if they seem kind of their facial expression or their communication, just ask them, you know, are you sad, or, you know, going on? Do you kind of miss the way that things used to be? Do you miss, you know, being able to drive, the independence that you used to have, or things along that line? I think that would be really important. So looking at the next kind of tip is to keep communication slow and basic. Again, it's going to take time to have conversations, more time than it took in the past. And using short sentences and basic words, I think is just a good way to make sure that they're able to process things on the fly. And it could be too that if there's like a question that you're asking, putting the question at the end of the sentence. I've heard someone say, instead of saying, what would you like for breakfast? Say, it's time for breakfast. Would you like some eggs? And so I think also I've even heard, like, not to give sort of an open-ended question of what would you like for breakfast, because there's like all the different options that can be difficult to process in the moment. So would you rather have eggs or oatmeal? And so that to me is a little bit more of an easier question for them to respond to. Try to limit distractions, and so as much as possible have communication that's focused on that person. Again, trying to be patient. And then if the person is kind of struggling with what words to find, just trying to fill in those words if that's acceptable to that person. So again, in the middle stage, there might be some cues that the person's giving you about their communication, and the cues that we can give them as well. Visible or visual cues can be a useful way to communicate when words aren't coming across very well. Writing things down for the person is really important. So there's sticky notes or reminder notes that can be put around the house. If there's a calendar or like a list of what needs to be done, that can be really useful. So like I mentioned, as you're asking questions, maybe put the answer in your question instead of what would you like to have for breakfast. It's time for breakfast, would you rather have eggs or oatmeal? And so that can be really useful as they're trying to sort of process a lot of the things that they're hearing. And then repeat as needed. So like I say, if there's like visual reminders you can have in place of like a calendar or like a time throughout the day of here's what we're going to do at different times. But then repeating information as much as you need to. Turning negatives into positives. So if you have someone, for example, where they're just really putting off like taking a shower and kind of just put up a fight for it each time, maybe turn it around and say, hey, Cindy's going to come visit today. Let's take a shower so you'll be ready when she's here. So it might kind of change that a little bit. And then avoid quizzing. So instead of, trying to sort of test their memories, like, you remember what I told you earlier today? That can just be really frustrating. So I think trying to avoid that can be a really compassionate thing for this person. Also trying to respond empathically and to reassure the person. I think it's good to, like, I think you'll again hear that frequently, to join the person in their reality and just trying to let them know that you are kind of understanding of what's going on with them as much as you're able to, being empathetic with them and just reassuring them that that you're sort of in this together and that you're there and you're listening to them. And I think one thing that I've heard about joining the person in their reality is that the facts are so much less important than that person's feelings. I think this is a really important thing, that the facts are so less important than how they're feeling. And so, like, correcting my dad that it wasn't 1956 wasn't as important as like how upset he would have been if we had sort of had an argument about that. So I'm just trying to remember that the facts aren't quite as important as the feelings are in that moment. Providing reassurance that you hear and understand, I think is good, just to let them know that what they're saying is being heard, and you're taking that in. Focus on feelings and not facts, which I know can be, again, kind of be challenging when you're wanting to correct a person, but trying to focus on what they're feeling and just validate the person and redirect them if necessary. So if we move into the late stages, and there's obviously going to be some other communication changes that happen there. It could be that communications are reduced to just a few words or sounds. It might be that they have responses to familiar words or phrases. They do still need to connect in this moment. So as much as possible, even though the communication has to be really different than it was when the person was either in an earlier stage or before this diagnosis, maintaining that sense of connection is really important. Remember that they are an adult with a sense of self, and try to continue that throughout the stages. My dad really reverted to behaviors that looked just like a child as he was going throughout, but he'd still had that sense of self that he was an adult. So I think trying to maintain that is really important. Trying to remember the person's history as much as possible. So if it's someone who like my mother's a vegetarian. So if she developed dementia and kind of was going throughout the phases, just trying to remember like the things that were important to her and respecting their preferences going throughout. Keep talking. So even kind of using familiar words or phrases or poems or songs. And so things like that, just to have them kind of hear, be part of communication, just hear that, even if they aren't able to contribute to as much as they could before. And then really at this point, in this phase, using the 5 senses to communicate is good. And we'll go through each of those. Now we'll hear from Sandra, whose mother is in the late stage of Alzheimer's disease.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. And my husband noted to me recently, he said, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
I love that. And I think that's a great reminder too, that that physical touch can just be so important. That, there's to me, even just that connection, that physical connection that it can create, but even just the soothingness, I would think of just her combing her mom's hair. I just really like that story. So other ways we can connect through touch, feeling different fabrics, kind of identifying shapes by touch. My dad loved, he always had like really rough skin on his hands. He loved like having lotion rubbed into his hands. And so that's something that he would have appreciated, also giving lotion hand massages. Again, identifying everyday items in a bag by touch. Visit with animals. So if there's a kitten or something nearby, obviously something that would be kind of soft and would let you pet it. even kind of using your hands to sculpt, like Play-Doh or things like that, or with clay, or even if it's just something as simple as just holding the person's hand or stroking their arm or their back, or like I know it's like this back scratch too. So just those ways you can kind of connect through touch. Through sight, so there's things you can do there as well. You know, some pretty pictures, maybe laminated, I think just kind of keeps them in good shape a little bit longer. Watching videos of animals or nature or travel, looking at photo albums together, that I think would be a good thing. And not necessarily, you remember who this person is, don't you? But just kind of just enjoying looking at the pictures together. Looking at pictures of like famous paintings or travel or like settings, favorite settings this person has, going to an aquarium or watching birds, painting with watercolors, and then even just to go outside and sit by an open window together. So just kind of enjoying, that's actually several senses you can get from that, not just sight, but maybe just like the feel of a cool breeze or just the smells outside. And so I think there can be several ways to kind of communicate through sight. Through sound and music, I think this familiar music, I think, is a really great way to connect with people. I don't know if you've seen these too, but I've seen so many videos of people that even in the late stages of Alzheimer's can still sing along with some of their favorite songs. And so just that music can stir so many happy memories in so many people. Listening to recordings of sounds of nature, kind of just kind of soothing sounds, identifying musical instruments by sound, listening to songs or speeches in the person's native language, again, if they're not a native speaker or not an English speaker, reading books and poetry, kind of reading them to the person and just letting them hear your tone of voice, just letting them hear your words and just kind of maintaining that kind of that connection through sound. Through smell. So there are times too, I will say that there are some people with dementia that their sense of smell is diminished. But if not, and there's ways to even to have kind of plastic bags that have different scents, like some herbs and spices that they liked, having a cotton ball that's dipped in essential oils, or even just some flowers, or just some smells that are really things that they enjoyed smelling. Using again, if you do hand massages, you can use a fragrant lotion for that, or even like cooking their favorite food and letting them smell those smells in the kitchen. Through taste. And so I think this is a great time to let the person eat whatever favorite foods they have. And so my dad loved ice cream. So for him, ice cream was a big thing. So letting the person enjoy all their kind of favorite foods, one of the things that they really enjoy tasting and their favorite flavors, I think is a really good way to connect with them through taste. So really in all the different stages, this is sort of a summary. Like I said, as much as possible, join the person in their reality to connect with them where they are, to connect with who they are, and the kind of correcting their behavior or trying to get them to realize, kind of accept our reality versus their reality can just lead to a lot of stress and unnecessary frustration. And so I think as caregivers, it's important for us to understand and accept what we can and what we cannot change. But remember that the person really does keep a sense of self despite all these different losses. They are the same person in general that they were before. It's just that there's adaptations that we have to make to connect with them in the ways that we haven't had to connect with them before. And demonstrating respect for them and connecting through their feelings. And again, trying to treat them always as the adult that they are. It might be that you do have to sort of decode the person's communications. It could be that there's behaviors, or there's, anger or frustration. It could be that it's like a physical need. Maybe they're, they need to go to the bathroom and they just can't communicate that. So trying to decode what these different messages are is important. And also recognize the effects of your mood and actions as a caregiver. Again, so much easier said than done to try to be patient and communicate without a lot of emotion in your voice. Again, it's much easier said than done, but trying to even just kind of step away and just take a moment and try to regain just that composure to recognize the effects that your moods and actions can have on the person. And again, trying to understand sources of the reaction. It could be that it's they're trying to communicate something that they don't know how to say with words. And so trying to see if there's maybe a physical need that can be met. And even to just as best as possible, helping to meet the needs while soothing and calming the person. So if they're upset or frustrated about something, if they raise their voice and we raise their voice, then it can become this escalation. So trying to meet their needs while also maintaining a soothing and sort of a calm voice. So now we're going to hear from Sam Fazio, who's the Director for Special Projects for the National Office.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So, for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
And I think, so often you hear about the advice you give caregivers is the same advice you would have on an airplane. If the oxygen mask drops, then you put your mask on first before you help somebody else. And so for caregivers, usually taking care of themselves is the last thing that happens. And so if you are a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's really important to take care of yourself. If you're not, and there's someone that that is a caregiver, maybe just seeing if there's something you could do for them to help them, either to go sit with the person and they can go run errands, or even just to take some time for themselves. But as much as possible, the caregiving role is just so overwhelming and physically and emotionally exhausting. And so as much as possible, trying to care for yourself in that moment is really important, or in that time is really important. So one thing I would say, there's a lot of resources that the Alzheimer's Association does have. I'm going to direct you first to the bottom left of the screen, the 24/7 helpline. And I've said so often, so my mother was I'm an only child. My mother was the primary caregiver for my dad, lived about a mile away from me. So I would step in and I would go sit with my dad while my mom ran errands or things like that. And if it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon and my mom, like something happened with my dad, or she just was at her wit's end, I think my mom would call me. If it were 2 a.m., I know that she wouldn't. And so for me to have this phone number, the 24/7 helpline, that at any time of the day, Christmas morning at 2 a.m., there's going to be someone there that will answer that phone call. And the people that work that helpline have a master's in either counseling or social work. So it's people that are highly trained to respond to whatever situation that they're presented on those phone calls. And so I really can't emphasize how important that resource is. And it's free. So I highly recommend, if there's someone that that is caregiving or has Alzheimer's, and this is obviously not something that only caregivers would need to do, but just for any time of the day, just being able to reach out is, to me, just such a wonderful, wonderful resource. You can see at the top left, the alz.org is the website. There's a lot of different resources that are there as well. You can see on the right for support groups and education programs and other types of community events. You can find those there as well. And then there are other kinds of online education programs that are on the website at training.alz.org. If you would like to get involved, so like I say, this is something that I really wanted to have I didn't want to have gone through this experience and have nothing positive to use it for. And so I'm glad to be able to volunteer with the association. We do have a few events that we do throughout the years. The top left is the Walk to End Alzheimer's. That usually takes place for us in the fall. And so we have in Birmingham, it'll be October 22nd. I'm up in your area. I don't exactly know the date, but I can find that out for y'all if you'd want me to. We have another event that we do in June with the longest day. The longest day of the year is the summer solstice. And so we kind of relate it to every day that you're living with or caring for someone that has Alzheimer's feels like the longest day. And so the fundraising that we do is to provide advocacy, it's to provide research, provide support programs and care programs. And so there's a lot of advocacy that we do as well for treatments and for programs that would benefit for patients with Alzheimer's or dementia. And then, like I said, this is our helpline, and there's something in the chat. Oh, thank you. Yes, yes. So the Birmingham Walk is October 22nd. But again, this is the last slide that we've got. I can't see people with it when I'm sharing the slides. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, just so I can see everybody and we can get to questions. But like I say, I'll leave this up for just a second, just to say, if you want to kind of take a picture, I can always put this in the chat as well. But to me, the 24/7 helpline is just such a wonderful resource. So if there's anybody that you know that might be maybe could benefit from, I highly recommend writing this down and just sharing this with that person. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I can find where my mouse is. There we go. And so at this point, I do want to see if there's any questions that you have. I also think it's a good opportunity too. There might be people who have, oh yeah, so yeah, the Huntsville one's already taken place. If there's people who have been through caregiving or have walked this before, there might be some tools or tricks or communication techniques that you've learned that you would like to share with other people. I think it's a great way of kind of sharing experiences. And so I just want to open it up for any questions or any advice or comments anybody has at this point.
Okay, Jenny, I did have a question. I know earlier in the presentation, you shared that one of the tips was to avoid sudden movements. Could you explain why that is important?
I think just for, well, thank you. I think if you're kind of off to the side, I think it depends on the person's peripheral vision and what they can see. And maybe it could be that they aren't, they don't know that you're there, or just like this, and maybe it's going to just be a little bit startling for the person. So I think just as much as possible, trying to kind of be in front of them, or just to kind of not come up upon them suddenly. I think it's just that's going to be probably something that would be a better process for approaching that person. And I don't know if there's times that I saw a couple of messages that my internet connection was stable. So I hope that the presentation dropped at any point. So if you need me to kind of go back over anything, that if there were any gaps, let me know.
I think it worked out.
Oh, good.
It worked out where it liked and finished your word and stuff like that. So I think it worked out.
Oh, good. Yes, and thank you for putting that helpline. Like I say, if there's no other resource that's shared with people that are dealing with Alzheimer's, I think the 24/7 helpline is just such a great, I really wish, I don't even know why, but for some reason I didn't think to reach out to the Alzheimer's Association when my dad was alive. And so I really wish that I had done that and shared that number with my mom, because I mean, my mom is one of the most selfless people, and if she thought that it would, be bothering me during the day, she probably wouldn't even reach out to me at 2 p.m. But I know at 2 a.m. she never would have called and woken me up and said, I just can't take this anymore. So.
Okay. Are there any questions? Also, I just want to mention that if you are listening to this presentation and you're not part of the Abundant Life family, we do have brochures available. The Alzheimer's Association has been gracious enough to provide some brochures. So for those of you who would like to have a written copy of the resources, maybe you're visiting with a friend, and so you are a part of this presentation, but ordinarily maybe you are not on Zoom or online. So we have printed materials regarding dementia and Alzheimer's that you can collect. So if you are in the Huntsville New Market area, we invite you to come by Saturday morning after 10 o'clock. So anytime between 10 and 1, then you can come by and collect any of those materials. And we are located on Winchester Road, and that is 20, oh mercy, I'm going blank now. Is it 2407, Jackie? I'm here going blank. We worship in Grace Point Baptist Church on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. until around 12:30 or so. And so we invite you to come by and pick up any of those materials. And I will also type that address in the chat, 2407 Winchester Road in Newmarket, Alabama. So just let us know. But if you have any questions, it could be a question regarding caregiving. It could be a question regarding just things of how you could support a friend. But if you have any questions, this is the time to ask them. 2940 Winchester Road. I know my numbers were mixed up. 2940 Winchester Road.
I'd like to appreciate the series that we've had. So thank you to our health ministries. But Jenny, your presentation today was especially effective because you added the personal testimony of your experience. What I like during the presentations are the testimonies from others who the Alzheimer's Association have worked with, but yours today as a presenter made a huge difference in the credibility of the information. So thank you for your transparency.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, we have a quiet group, but I will say, I will echo Jackie's sentiments. The information, you give what might be happening, but you also give those strategies and the personal testimonies. It really brought it home. It made it truly rare, just real to how we can respond. But I think something else that really stood out to me is everything you said echoed how we are to treat other human beings, period.
That's a great point.
So I thought it was such an interesting thing. I kept on saying, if we treated everybody like this would be awesome.
Yeah, all the times I've never even considered that's a great, this is really effective communication for dealing with just a person that has Alzheimer's or dementia. That's an excellent point.
Okay, I'm here. So type in that information about where people can get that. Now, one of the things, I'm going to go back to something that you said earlier, Jenny, and it was about the differences between the different stages. Like, I find that the early stage and the middle stage seemed really, really like there was a lot of intersection. Whereas when it got to the later stage, then you could see a clear gap. And what advice do you have for those who have kind of missed it? Like they were just thinking, oh, my parents are getting on my last nerve. They keep on calling me asking the same question. I think they're trying to get me to do something, and that's why they keep on doing it. And they really never picked up on that there was something else going on. But now maybe they have advanced beyond the early stages. What advice do you have for those persons in terms of support groups or other things that they can do to kind of not really, it's like catching up, but not really catching up?
I said the support groups is an excellent first step. I think in each person with Alzheimer's or dementia is almost a unique, it's a unique situation in and of itself. Like, it's rare that you have the exact same process or time or, progression through phases person. So, so I think what the support group can do really is to kind of give that support, obviously, but I think there's emotions that you have in those that you feel just either other people that haven't been through that can't understand it, or even like just say out loud, so the emotions that I might have had as I was helping my mom care for my dad, like I don't know that I would really, I think I would feel really judged if I said that to a friend that wasn't going through this, but in a support group, it's like, there's no judgment. We know. And so I think just to be with other people who know how difficult, how scary it is, again, to share it, we did this with my mom and this worked really well. And, to kind of even share techniques, I think really useful. And I think one thing I would say too, as we're getting, hopefully treatments that are, affordable and are able to actually modify this disease state, then the diagnosis is kind of increases for me. 5 years ago, like, well, what's the point of getting diagnosed? Because we don't really have any medications that can. The benefit of diagnosis is if there's someone that would be interested in being involved in a clinical trial to try out a new medication, or, as we start to get therapies that can modify the disease a little bit better, then those are going to be more important. But I think for kind of just someone who's either, if you're not quite sure if this is Alzheimer's or dementia, like I say, if there's ever something happens and it's like a month ago they were fine, and now they're calling me every day to ask this, that to me would be a really big change. And it could be easily that something is like a medication or some other medical condition that's causing these problems. It's not necessarily Alzheimer's or dementia. It could be something else that's causing these issues. And so it's important to rule out something to make sure it's not just assumed it's Alzheimer's. It could be maybe their blood sugar has been low, or blood sugar has been. So it could be, there's things along those lines that could mask or kind of mimic Alzheimer's or dementia. But then kind of going back to the question of like, what can you do to cope? I think the trying to get resources to either, okay, if it's, so me being an only child, my dad's passed away, my mom is still alive and thankfully in good health. But if she were to develop Alzheimer's and dementia and I'm the sole person around to care for her, like beginning to form that village that you're going to need. Like, what church family can you get to either help run errands or like to get sitters, or like just trying to go ahead and build that support system that you're going to need, I think is another sort of step along with support groups that are important. You're muted.
You're on mute.
Sorry. I was saying, I'm finding that more and more students between the ages of 18 and 25, that they are sharing that they are taking care of their parents who are going through Alzheimer's and dementia. You're thinking, oh, they're pretty young to have to be the caretakers, and they're now becoming responsible for the finances and the medical appointments and all of that. So I am extremely thankful that you have the Alzheimer's Association and that 24/7 line, as well as the support groups available.
I would even say too, so there's a very different communication, like what they're willing to talk about, what they're not willing to talk about. If there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia, even if it kind of goes against what you and your family have done, having as many conversations about their, end of life care, like financials. Like the biggest thing with my dad was driving. And so there's a clinic that at UAB that would assess driving. They would like tell you can't drive anymore. They would send a letter to the doctor saying this person isn't safe to drive. And Dad went through that clinic and had the letter sent to his doctor. My mom says it's a live drive anymore. And so that was the biggest thing for him that he couldn't drive anymore, like that loss of independence. And I'll be honest, he was a better driver than my mother. And so he did not want to have to ride with her. And so like those kinds of talking through, okay, when you drive anymore, what would you know, how do we go about making that? And so again, this is something that I don't know that how much of this we would have done. I think I wish we had done a lot more of those discussions of, this sounds kind of crass, but thankfully, I use the word thankfully, that crass word there. My dad passed away from cancer and not dementia. And so but the disease was going on, like knowing what that downhill slide was most likely, you know, I really wish we could have gotten his thoughts about what, like, you know, what systems would you like for us to follow? You know, plans would you like for us to follow, or just getting that person's input as to any future planning.
Definitely. Definitely. Good information.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since we don't have any more questions, I know that you will enjoy the rest of the afternoon in our shared time that we have on this beautiful day. And I want to thank you so much, Jenny, for giving of your time and sharing that information with us. I want to say that personally, the information that you provided has been very helpful for me. And I am extremely thankful to that the Alzheimer's Association has arranged for us to have these monthly sessions. So I say thank you so much.
I thank you all for, you know, this is such a difficult topic to deal with, and the fact that this is something that you wanted, I think it just speaks really, really highly of you as a community, as a church congregation, and I really am more thankful to you than you. I really appreciate the fact that y'all are doing this as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. So this afternoon, we are going to sign off. Our guest has been Jenny Beall, and we have had effective communication. That has been our topic. And I invite you to tune in next month, the first Saturday of November, and we will be continuing our conversation. If you would like more information, feel free to go ahead and send us an email. It's almchurch7@gmail.com. And we'd be more than happy to send you a link to any of the other recordings in this series. And if you have a special topic that you would like us to cover, also feel free to shoot us a message, and we'll be more than happy to go ahead and bring together presenters focusing on those topics for you. So I bid everyone adieu. Have a wonderful Saturday, Sabbath time, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.